Welcome to Creating a Buzz About the Honeybees. Every Friday I am putting up on my blog, on my website, information about the honeybees to help the children learn more about these incredible creatures that have been with us for over 100 million years, and not just to help the children but to help the adults too. So this week's video is about the beehives. I'm going to tell you all about the different components that make up a beehive, helped, as you can see, by my trusty dog Miss Tilly. Well, I'm not sure she's being very helpful, are you? So when I finish the video, when you've finished watching the video, on the blog there'll be more information about the beehives. There will also be some questions which, if you want to, you can answer and enter into a competition which you can win a signed copy of my book, Betsy Valentine and the Honeybees. So onward and upward. If I can move Miss Tilly, I'm not sure I can, but normally she moves when I move. There you are, she's gone. I'll start by telling you this here beehive I have here is a WBC hive. It's ornamental, it's real, but it's all blocked up so the bees can't get in there, or wasps or anything. And thank you, Tilly. You can be in it, but you have to sit down. Sit down. There we go. Good girl. Right. So this is a WBC hive. Very pretty. We tend to use it in picture books, etc., etc. It is quite a popular hive, but it's quite a fiddly hive because you take this roof off, then you have to take all these lifts off, and once you've done all that, inside you've got a box which is smaller than a national hive, so less bees, less honey, less productive. But nonetheless, it's still quite a popular hive, even though it's quite high maintenance. I use a national hive. Now, this has been deconstructed like the British Bake Off, so I'm going to build it up for you and show you all the parts that make it up, and maybe explain just a little bit about them too, but I'm not going to go into that too much because another week I will tell you actually what does go on in this hive. This is just about the hive itself. So to start off with, this is a stand. All beekeepers put their hives on stands. Why do we do this? Well, because bees are very good at controlling temperature. They can control the heat and they can control the cold, but they can't control the damp. If it's damp, that can kill the honeybees. So if we put our hives on a stand, when it's raining, they don't absorb the wet from either the tarmac or the grass or wherever you are keeping them. So that's why we use a stand. The next thing is, on top of the stand goes a floor. The floor has a mesh base to it, which allows a good circulation of air to go through, and also it's very good for the droppings to go through, because out in the wild, in Tibet and various places where there are wild honeybees, they build their hives up in the mountains and in trees, and their droppings go to the ground. Well, they're very clean creatures. In this country there's no such thing as a wild honeybee, so they're all kept in hives. Any honeybee you see in a garden, in a park, or anywhere you're walking, within a 3-mile radius, that honeybee belongs to a beekeeper. So being clean, they want their droppings to go through to the floor, so we give them that this lovely mesh flooring. It's also very important for a thing called the varroa mite. Again, I won't go into that too much now, but it's a very dangerous little mite. It's not very bee friendly. In fact, I don't even know why I said that. It's not bee friendly at all. It lives on the thorax of a honeybee, and it literally does suck the life out of it, and it's a tiny little red mite, the size probably even smaller than a pinhead. And as a beekeeper, we can keep a count. Every hive does have varroa, and we can keep a count of that varroa by, in the spring and summer, popping this underneath the floor here, like that. It's called a varroa board, and then all the mites that have died drop down through there, and we leave it in for 24 hours. Then we take it out, and if you can count the amount of bees on here, then you're kind of okay. And if you can't, then it's a sort of overwhelming amount. You really do need to get help and treat your beehive, or else you could lose a whole colony of bees. Very important little piece of equipment, that, the varroa board. So also you can see here we have a landing board. the bees, the flying bees, they're out there, they're very busy, they're coming back laden with pollen and water and propolis and nectar, and it gives them somewhere to rest when it's like Heathrow Airport here, going in and out, taking off and landing. It gives them somewhere to rest before they come in and can get past the guard bees to make sure they are not rubber bees or wasps, and they are from the hive. So that's the landing board. This is the door. Right, so in the summer we'd have a nice big entrance like that to give more air to come in, and so the flying bees can get in and out more easily whilst they're queuing here on the landing board. In the winter we would turn it round like that, so they've only got a small gap that they can get through, and over that in the winter we put what we call a mouse guard, and the mouse guard is metal and it's got lots of little like drawing pin size holes to prevent mice coming in, because the mice love a beehive in the winter because it's warm and of course it's full of honey. So in the summer you would see the door, it would be in like that. Now some beekeepers take the door out on a really hot spell and leave all that entrance free so they can come in and out more easily. I don't do that because my hives, they're not in my back garden, they're in a field just over the road there, and I can't keep an eye on them for if, you know, they're going to be invaded by wasps. So my door will look like that, and you've got this lovely big space there for them to get in. So on top of the floor, this is the brood box. This is where it all happens, inside this brood box. Now, again, I don't know if you're aware that in the height of the summer, a honeybee only lives for 6 weeks. And for one of those weeks, she's the flying bee, the forager bee that goes out collecting all the lovely pollen and nectar, etc. But the other 5 weeks, they're in this hive. Well, that will be another video I do, telling you what goes on in this hive, what's happening to that honeybee, what's she going through before she becomes the ultimate, the flying bee. But for now, this is about the hive. Inside the brood box, in a national hive such as this, we have 11 frames. They start off like this, okay, they're empty. We give them, I'm just going to put that to one side, you'll see why in a moment. We give them this fresh foundation. Sorry, there's a hole in this one. It's my demonstration hive, and children, you do tend to point a lot, kids. Anyway, so this is fresh foundation, and this has come from recycled wax. We beekeepers, we recycle everything. We don't waste a thing that our honeybees do. So this is from recycled wax that I send off to a company in Windsor called Thorns, and they will melt it. I've melted it down, and then they will send you some foundation, or you can go there and buy foundation at a reduced cost. Okay, not wasting anything that the bees do. And then of course they pull out the foundation. Now I don't know, I'm going to walk a little bit nearer. I don't know how much this will stay in focus. There we go, that's a little bit nearer. That's the foundation pulled into beautiful hexagon shapes, which the bees fill with the pollen and the nectar, etc. And the queen lays her eggs. So 11 frames in a hive, and all with lovely wax foundation, okay, and that happens in the brood box. On top of the brood box in the spring we would put a queen excluder. Now this is they sort of all different types. This is the type I use, and I don't know if you can see here, this is called bee space, okay. So I wouldn't put the queen excluder on top of the brood box like that, because there's no space for the bees to walk on top of the frames. So you'd put it this way up where it's got a little like step to it, and we place the queen excluder like that, and now the honeybees can walk along the tops of their bars and get through. Now the queen excluder is used to exclude the queen, to stop the queen coming up into the super. Now again, when the bees live out in the wild, they keep on making lots of wax, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'll put some pictures up of that, of the bees in the comb in the mountains. But of course there's no such thing as a wild honeybee in this country and many countries in the world, and they do live in beehives, and so bees keep making wax, they keep producing honey. There's no moment in the summer where the girls turn around and say, you know what, we got enough honey to get through the winter, let's take the rest of the summer off. They're not called worker bees for nothing, so they just keep on producing wax and honey, so they have to have somewhere to put it, and that's where they put it, in the supers. Queen excluder, why don't we want the queen in the super? Because she'll lay eggs, and we don't want eggs in our honey. They can have it in theirs, but we don't want it in ours. They've got plenty of stores down there in their brood box. Also, it stops the drones, and the drones are the male bees, and they're a little bit bigger than the girl bees because they would just come up and eat the honey, and they don't contribute anything else to the hive. Again, that's something else I'll tell you about, but this is the super. Again, there are 11 frames in a super, and you can see it's half the size, that's why I kept this out, of the main one. You know, the brood box frame, it's half the size. Now, the reason it's half the size is for practical reasons, because on every frame, into which, again, we give them wax foundation, and then they pull it out like that, like the other ones, and then they will fill it with their stores, and then like this is a picture, and they'll cap it over with a very fine layer of wax. So this is the stores that they put in there. So that's the super. On top of the super, we put a crown board. This is a crown board. I suppose it's called a crown because a crown sits on top of your head and it goes on top of everything. And incidentally, this is called a super because it comes from the word superior. Again, something that sits on top, and that sits on top of the brood box. So this is my crown board. Why has it got holes in it? Well, in the winter we have to feed our bees, and sometimes in the spring as well, if they haven't got enough stores to get them going, to give them the energy to fly and bring back all their bits that they need. So we feed them. So we have to see where the cluster is, and we can turn this around with the holes. We can find the cluster, and then we can put feed on top of that area, because you know, in the winter, if they've got, I know this is a super, but imagine this is a brood box. Imagine the bees are clustering here and their stores are back here. If it's cold, they won't go back for it, and they can starve. So we, just to make sure, we put a little bit of fondant icing in the winter over wherever their cluster is, and then we will close up the hole in the other one with a bee escape. It's called a bee escape because the bees can go down but they can't get up. And this crown board has a dual function, and we pop it in there, probably a bit easier than I'm doing now. There we go. And then what I do is I put just a little bit of netting over the other hole to give them ventilation, and that stops them building the wax up into the lid, which they will do because bees, they produce wax. They've got glands in the tops of their heads, and that produces that's the royal jelly. They've got wax glands on their stomach, ignore the top of the head bit. They've got wax glands on their tummies, and they just keep producing wax, and they've got to put it somewhere. So if there's a hole, they'll build it up through there. So I would cover that with netting. The crown board is also used, the bee escapes are also used to take the supers off. So when we spin, we put that there, and we put that there, and then we put another crown board on top of there. So the bees that are in the super will go down into the brood box, come away from the super, so we can then lift this off. It won't have many or any bees in it, and spin it and take all the honey out, and then we give it back to them actually to clean out properly. But again, that's another talk. So there we go. That's the super and the crown board, and finally on top of that we put the lid, okay, which has got ventilation in it as well. So let's just go through that one more time for you very quickly. We have the stand because it's damp, and we don't want our hives to get damp. They can't control the damp. We have the floor, which has a mesh floor for their droppings and a landing board. We have the door, which the entrance size can change according to the weather conditions. We have the brood box where the queen lives with all the house bees, and that's where they spend the first 5 weeks of their life before they become the flying bees. We have the queen excluder that stops the queen going up into the super to lay her eggs, and the drones, which are the boy bees, the male bees, going up and just simply eating all the honey. And this is the super where they put their excess stores, because they've got to put it somewhere. They run out of space down here. On top of that, we have the crown board, and then to stop them building the wax up into the lid, which honestly if you don't put that on, it's a terrible mess when you try to take the lid off. And of course the lid or the roof of the hive. And let's not forget that all important Varroa board, which helps us control the amount of Varroa that's in our hives. So that's a national hive. I will put up a whole list and pictures of some other hives that you can find. I'll try and find as many different hives as I can and put the pictures up. I hope you've enjoyed the video. That's where the honeybees live, and I'll see you next week.